Well, hi everyone, Shaun Humphries here. Welcome to All Things Retirement. Well, if you're beginning to think about retirement, you've probably been consuming a lot of different YouTube videos on the topic. And what you'll find typically is most of the content deals with what we refer to as the financial risks that you should be dealing with or planning for in your retirement plan. But the reality is, those really aren't the risks that are going to blow up your retirement plan. There are some key risks that often don't get talked about in all the different retirement videos that you're consuming right now. And we're guilty of that as well in our channel. So we typically talk about the financial risks, but what are the other risks, non-financial risks, that actually have a higher probability of blowing up your plan than the financial concerns that you might have? So at the beginning of this video, we'll talk about the 5 financial risks that typically get dealt with in the context of a retirement income plan. It's much of the content we talk about in this channel and likely other channels that you've gone to. But we'll also talk about the 5 non-financial risks that have a greater likelihood of blowing up your retirement plan. Those are the critical ones that you need to be paying attention to. And that's based on both research and our team's 30 years of experience in working with clients, talking to various families, and seeing what happens out there in the wild in terms of what issues people have to deal with throughout their retirement lives. Now, if you're new to our channel, make sure you hit subscribe so you're not missing future content. We're posting on a regular basis. As well, if you want to find out how you can get a complimentary retirement forecast and access to free educational resources, go to the show notes where there's links to that content, as well as information for the complimentary retirement planning forecast. Okay, first of all, I just want to talk about the typical financial risks, 5 of them, that we need to be dealing with in the context of our retirement income planning. Let's take a look at that right now. So we'll talk about the financial risks. There's probably 5 that come to mind for me pretty quickly. There could be others that you might think about when you go through this list. But the reality around financial risk for retirement, it's kind of clinical, right? You look at the numbers, you look at your goals, you do your homework, you do the forecasts, you build in some buffer by under-promising, over-delivering, making sure your assumptions are reasonable, and being ruthless with your homework. All right. So if you do those things, there's a very high probability that you will be able to navigate the risks I'm going to talk about. So the 5 that are listed here were running out of money risk, inflation risk, sequence of return risk, market risk. Those 2 are connected, and then longevity risk. Longevity risk is also connected to running out of money risk. Now, the running out of money risk and the longevity risks are connected, but they can be planned for. So a lot of the work that we do with clients is really just doing the forecast, getting the plan in place, looking at the budgetary requirements, factoring in the inflation risk. That is one of the risks that people worry about and is a real risk. And then making sure the portfolio is properly structured to deal with market risk. We know that capital markets fluctuate. Most of the time they're up, but 25% of the time they're down. And at the same time they're down, you'll need to produce income. There are lots of strategies that you can employ to navigate economic and market risk while at the same time having a high probability that you'll fund your retirement income goals and not get derailed financially. All right, so financial risks can be planned for. And like I said, if you are conservative in your assumptions, you've done your homework, I think for many of you, doing it on your own may not be advisable. Work with a retirement income planning specialist to do the forecast for you, to do different iterations to help you understand how resilient your financial retirement plan is from a financial risk standpoint. If you go through that process, then these risks, running out of money, inflation risk, sequence of return risk, market risk, longevity risk as an example, can be planned for. Those are not the risks that will derail your retirement income planning. Very unlikely if you properly planned and if you are updating that plan on a regular basis. So if those risks are unlikely to derail your financial plan, then what risks could derail your financial plan? What risks might have a higher probability of being problematic for you? So let's take a look at those right now. Now, before I go into this topic on the non-financial risks, the first thing that I want to share with you is I don't want to come across as being condescending, patronizing in any way. So the risks I'm going to talk about are just risks that any couple, any family, individual can face, and it's just part of life. And what you're going to find is, again, when I get back to my discussion on financial planning, retirement income planning can be very clinical if you're just looking at the numbers. We often say that knowledge is power. The more information you have, the more knowledge you have, the better decisions you can make. But the reality is we're also human beings. And as human beings, it's not just knowledge, it's the application of the knowledge in the context of emotion, psychology, and relationships. And I think you're getting a bit of a sense of where I'm going here. A lot of the non-financial risks that we have to contend with in our retirement income plans are in the areas of psychology, emotion, and relationships. That's just the reality. And it doesn't matter how good your financial plan is or retirement income plan. It doesn't matter how great your knowledge level is in the financial planning area that you're looking at. It's those three areas, your relationships, emotion, and psychology, that can derail what you do. So let's look at some specific examples that can come up. Okay, so I think you're getting a sense of where we're going here. So let's take a look at relationships. And so if you had to sort of narrow in on some of the relationship issues that can derail our financial planning, one of the first ones is if you're in a relationship, you have a partner, you're married, then the obvious one is divorce or separation. The worst thing that could happen to you from a financial planning standpoint, pure finances, is going through a separation or divorce, 5 years into retirement, at retirement, because now you don't have time to really recalibrate your financial situation. So if you had to go through a separation or divorce, probably the best time is, when you're in your 30s or even your 40s, so you can recover from that financially. So it's double jeopardy, right? So you go through a separation divorce, you're now in your early 60s, now you have to look after two households and divide your assets in half. Clearly that's not a great situation. And yet the seeds for that separation or divorce may have been sown years ago. So we don't think about the non-financial aspects of our planning, but I think a lot of people, when we talk about your health and your relationships and your emotion and dealing with stress and all those kinds of things, I'm sure a lot of you're not interested in that content. You're just looking at the nuts and bolts of planning the financial aspects. And yet if you're not investing in your relationships so that divorce or separation is less likely, we don't control this entirely, but making it less likely by really investing in the relationships, that's one of the most important investments you're going to make in your financial plan, because if it goes south, it's going to be devastating to your retirement income plan. So that's the first one. The next one is the death of a partner. And it's part of the same discussion, but more in the context of making sure your partner, if you are the situation that's leading the charge financially, and your partner just kind of goes along with the flow of the conversations, but really isn't interested, one of the things you'll want to really work on is to get your partner involved in those discussions, at least at a high level. Make sure that they feel that they're part of the planning process with you, or if you're working with an advisor, with that advisor. Because in the death of a partner, not only can it be financially devastating, and you want to make sure that your financial plan at least deals with that aspect, right? Is there enough estate value or insurance value to make sure your partner is looked after to the extent that you've agreed are requirements for them? Then the next step is to make sure that they have a psychological frame and a basic knowledge level so they're not making mistakes when there's a passing of their partner. Now they have to deal with the finances and they're not prepared. Right? So that is another issue that can derail people financially, is in the midst of a devastating situation, the loss of a partner, all the emotion around that, and then having to deal with finances. That is a terrible cocktail for disaster. And so that's an important one. If you have a partner and they've been more in delegation mode, they let you deal with it, bring them into these conversations. Even if they don't want to, the more you can expose them to that discussion, the better prepared they'll be for the unfortunate reality that stuff happens in life, right? The next one, which is a big one, is adult children. Adult children who have needs and have not become independent financially, maybe even emotionally. And it's a huge trigger point. So you see what happens to people as they get older, you're never not a parent. And so when your kids have needs and they come to you for financial support, it's very easy for parents not to bring their financial reality into the lives of their kids when the kids have a need. They don't think clearly around the implications for them. So if you're in your 60s or 70s and you have adult children who are looking for financial support, really, in most cases, you need to push back to them and say, listen, you need to figure this out. Mom and dad, or whatever the situation is, we've saved for our retirement. We have been very careful how we've managed our finances. We'll help you, emotionally, we'll help you relationally, we'll give you advice if that's helpful, but we're not going to begin, giving you assets or pledging our house to security or that kind of thing. That is the most difficult thing to do, because it's kind of tough love, right? You need to allow your kids to suffer the consequences of their decisions, and if their financial reality is very difficult, they need to own that more often than not. I know there's, extenuating circumstances, but if you had to identify an area that can really derail you financially, it can be kids. That's just the reality. They have needs. They, go through difficulties financially, or they have their own separation, divorce issues, and then you get called into that. And because of your love for them, you make financial decisions that you, under normal circumstances, would never make. And when the dust settles, you realize it's been devastating to your own finances. The next area is emotional triggers. Okay, so we've got the divorce, separation, we've got death of a partner, we have the adult children that have needs, and then we have emotional triggers. And emotional triggers are just the fact that we're human. Now, one of the ways that you fight against emotional triggers is you have a very solid plan financially, and that you do spend time educating yourself. And this is where it becomes a little self-serving, because I'm going to talk about emotional triggers, and the next one's going to be psychological triggers. We've talked about this a lot on the channel. For most people, they greatly value from having a coaching relationship, because what the coach does is they come into situations where it could be emotional or psychological triggers that may motivate someone to make a bad financial decision, and the coach helps to move them from where they are to where they need to be to make the right high probability decision. So emotional triggers are just all around us. If you look at finances, if the economy is not doing well, or if the markets are not doing well, or if you're going through your own emotionally tough time caused by some of the other issues that I've talked about, that creates stress, and it creates sometimes the inability to make really good, common sense, smart decisions. And so those emotional triggers that come about through life, we're all human, we're going to experience them. So you've spent a whole bunch of time focused on building a great portfolio and really good financial assets and doing some awesome tax planning, and you've got a estate plan that's put together, and yet these emotional triggers can just leap out of the dark, bite you, and cause you to make a bad decision. All it takes is one bad mistake, one big mistake, and that will derail you. So emotional triggers are big ones. Have people around you that can help you navigate through those things. Don't ignore them. Don't pretend that those things can't happen. Over a long life, you're going to be facing struggles and challenges that could derail you and be an emotional trigger for you. And then psychological triggers, that's the last one. We've talked about this a few times in our channel. It's not one we've ignored, but they're common ones. Like, so you look at the fact that human beings weigh the potential for loss or real loss far more heavily psychologically and emotionally than the potential for gain or real gain. And that skews us in a particular direction. We make decisions around loss prevention, they're not always the best strategies, and they cause us to make knee-jerk decisions, particularly financially, that can really hurt us. So the reason many people underperform in their portfolios is because of psychological triggers. Again, the fact that we weigh loss much more heavily. Another one is, following the herd. What's the mantra today? What is social media saying we should do? What are the financial gurus and the market gurus saying is the best strategy for you? And so if you see a lot of people moving in a certain direction, it's natural for us to follow the herd and make the same decisions, but often, particularly when it comes to finances and markets and investing, that may not be the right decision. And then we have, recency. So whatever happens in the immediate past influences the decisions we make in the future, and those may not be the right decisions. Sometimes we have to be contrarian when we look at our planning and our finances. So I don't want to belabor this point. I think you get it. The non-financial issues over a 30-year time frame for retirement, separation, divorce, death of a partner, the needs of adult children, emotional triggers and psychological triggers, those are the things that you need to fortify yourself against so that you don't get derailed by those things. The first recognition is life can be chaotic. You'll be confronted with issues over a 30-year retirement that will trigger, one or maybe many of these things. What is your strategy to deal with it? Well, I would submit that having a solid financial plan is a starting point for that. That helps to build resilience in your planning. Secondly, whether it's your partner, a family friend, or you work with an advisor, the trusted advisor that you have confidence in, will help you to navigate these issues so that you do not make knee-jerk decisions in the moment that could really, really hurt you. And like I said, with your kids, it's hard, but show tough love. Push resources in their direction that will help them to make good financial decisions. Try to encourage them to have their own advisor to help them be successful through a coaching relationship. The more educated they are in these topics, the higher probability that they will not need your financial assistance in their own planning. As it relates to relationships, obviously, like I said, invest in your relationship. Do whatever you need to make sure that your relationships are healthy so that they don't break down at a time in life when you can least afford it. And when it comes to a spouse or partner, if they're not involved in the finances right now, if you've been basically in a delegation relationship, get them involved. Try to encourage them to be there, at least at the high level discussions, because you may not always be around. And if you're not around, you need to make sure they've got established relationships and a little bit of education that will be very, very helpful through difficult transition points. Anyway, hopefully that's food for thought for you. It's one of those areas that we don't talk about too much, but it's a reality. And again, if you're looking to get additional information on retirement income planning, go to the show notes. There's free resources there. And if you'd like to find out how to get a complimentary forecast, again, there's a link to get back to our website to get more information on that. And finally, if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that so you don't miss future content that we're posting on a regular basis. Anyway, wishing you all the best in your retirement and overall wealth planning journey. You take care. Bye-bye.